the MCAT CARS podcast, session number 63. The CARS section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT CARS podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, and I hope you are here to learn all about the MCAT, how to break down passages, how to break down paragraphs, how to break down sentences, how to really understand what that MCAT author is trying to get you to understand. So you're trying to understand what they're trying to get you to understand. Hopefully you understand that, because I don't understand it. All right. As always, I am joined by Jack Westin from jackwestin.com. He is the internet's premier MCAT CARS tutor. Now, when we talk about MCAT CARS, when you learn the strategies necessary to get a great MCAT CARS score, you are learning the skills that will help you in every other section as well. So join along with us if you want and if you can. And the way we recommend you listen to this podcast is by reading the article first, really trying to understand the article first, and then listening to the podcast to see what mistakes you made, to see where you went right, to see where you went wrong, and much more. That is how you're going to get the most out of this podcast. Let's go and jump in and say hello to Jack. Jack Westin back for some more MCAT CARS podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm excited to chat with you. I'm excited to help people learn how to better understand, better crush the MCAT. Not just the CARS section, right? Because understanding CARS is the key to everything. It's like Pandora's box. Once you get in, once you get the CARS, everything else. A better analogy, right? This CARS is like Neo in the Matrix. And once you understand CARS, then everything else just breaks down.
Oh man, don't get me started with the Matrix. Don't get me started.
Matrix 4 coming. Have you seen that?
I know, I heard.
I'm so excited.
I don't think this generation appreciates the Matrix. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But
all they know about the Matrix is the red pill, blue pill memes.
Right. Yeah.
Such a good movie. Movies. Number 2, maybe not. But anyway, let's jump into our passage today. And as I tell students all the time, right? If you are going to follow along with us, if you are struggling with CARS, we definitely recommend, or I definitely recommend, maybe Jack just disagrees, but I recommend like sitting down at the table with us with this article, either on a screen or print it out, so you can do it with us and not just listen to us go through it. So
yeah, no, I really recommend just doing it on your own first. So read it on your own and then listen to the podcast, because then you'll say, oh, wow, okay, I didn't see it that way. Or, oh, okay, I did see it that way. And that will really help.
Exactly. What do we have for us today?
A very descriptive article. And these are the kinds of passages that usually scare a lot of ESL students. So students whose English is a second language for typically have a hard time understanding the details and minutia of a sentence. And we'll see if that really matters today. We'll see if understanding every word, every detail really makes a big impact in your ability to get the big picture.
All right. So again, if you want to follow along in the show notes, you can find the link to this article there. All right. So first paragraph. When you're little, the basic laboratory of scariness and mystery is a tent in the backyard. All right. So a tent in the backyard, a laboratory of scariness and mystery. I'm not quite sure what that means at this point, but I can picture a tent in the backyard. I'm good there.
Yeah. So just again, very descriptive, right?
Yeah.
So you're setting up the scene of scariness, mystery, a tent, so you can imagine being a kid and maybe having some fears. Yeah. Go ahead.
The 30 feet from the tent flap to the back door spans an immeasurable distance. Mentally, a ghost story told at the kitchen table is an anecdote, while the same story told by flashlight late at night in the tent howls with the darkness all around. All right, so again, very descriptive. You definitely weren't lying there. So it's talking about the same story, either inside the house at the table is just a story, an anecdote, and the same story is something that howls with the darkness, right? It's so scary, I guess they're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this was a pretty long sentence, so what I would have recommended is stopping at the semicolon. I usually stop at semicolons. I treat them like a period, or an exclamation mark or a question mark. So in this part, I would stop and try to understand what they're saying. And then I would keep reading, and yeah, they're making this comparison, right? If you're told a ghost story in the kitchen, it's not as amusing or as scary as it would be outside or outdoors in the darkness, right? And the hard part here is understanding that they're making a comparison between the kitchen and the tent. You may not know exactly what howls with the darkness means. It's kind of like a metaphor. But I mean, you could also think of it in terms of like wolves, like kind of howling outside while you're outdoors, But yeah, so in this case, having that visualization, that description is going to be very important going forward.
Yeah. All right. So definitely a longer sentence there. Okay. Love and learning and charity may begin at home, but for most humans, fear begins outside. All right. So after reading this last sentence, my assumption is that this author is going to lead us down a path towards talking about fear. It talked about stories and scariness and obviously the tent in the backyard. And now it's saying, hey, fear begins outside. So that's kind of what I take from it.
Yeah, very consistent. Good. So fear outside, it's a common theme in this entire paragraph.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So lots of description, but kind of key points, seemed easy enough to take away from it.
Right. And even if you do not understand howls with the darkness all around, the last sentence clears it up.
Yeah.
Right. Fear begins outside. And that's typically what happens is they clear up what they really care about as you keep reading. So don't give up, right? Just keep reading. Go ahead.
As a young man, I sometimes used to fantasize about how great it would have been to wander the American continent before civilization ruined it. Okay. So again, the author here saying just painting a picture of wandering the U.S. before civilization took hold.
Yeah, that's a major opinion, right?
Yeah.
Civilization ruining America, right?
Yeah.
And the American continent. So you got to realize that even though the author presents it as if it's a fact, it's not. And I find that many students have a hard time distinguishing facts from arguments. And you're responsible for knowing the difference as you read passages. The reason why I think they have a difficult time with it is because as a student, you're trained to just learn whatever the teacher gives you, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is that, that's this. And you never really think about its validity, whether or not it's, a good thing to agree with this idea. With cars, the game is totally different. You're not supposed to memorize. You're supposed to understand and contemplate and think about whether or not you as an individual agree or disagree with it. So as I'm reading this, I'm actually thinking, does civilization actually ruin the American continent? I don't know about that. Maybe it gives me greater accessibility to the continent for all I know, right?
Yeah.
So but when you answer the questions, you have to be thinking like the author, right? So when I'm reading, debate the author, think about it as if it's a conversation. But when you get to the questions, you must be the author. You must think like the author. Okay.
When I get to an end of a sentence like this, or the student gets to an end of a sentence like this, where it seems to really paint a picture and point in one direction, should the student after every sentence like this go, okay, that's fact, or another way of saying that potentially is that's a generally recognized true statement, author's opinion?
Yeah, in my course, that's what the course is all about, right? We break down sentences and try to understand how they relate to the passage.
Nice.
So we have different terminologies for different kinds of sentences and what they're trying to do. So yeah, I think breaking it down, trying to understand what is this sentence doing. Simply asking yourself, why is the author bringing this up, is really important. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I dreamed of seeing the Great Lakes before industrial pollution, the Appalachian Hills before strip mining, the Great Plains before the railroad, etc. So just examples of what the author was fantasizing about. The fantasy has been common in the years ever since most real American wilderness disappeared. All right, so it's interesting. So going back to my comment 2 seconds ago of, is this author's opinion or is this generally considered fact where American wilderness has disappeared? I don't know if I'd agree with that, but the author seems to fantasize about seeing everything before he or she thinks that the wilderness disappeared.
Right. So you just have to understand that the author is pretty pessimistic about how civilization interacts with Americas, right? Or at least the continent.
Yeah. At the end of the movie, Shakespeare in Love, for example, Gwyneth Paltrow walks slowly from the sea across a broad white beach in the 1950s, a horizon ahead of her as big as the American future. So, I'm assuming this is just an example of what it looked like before. Or not I said the 1950s. This is actually the 1590s, rather. Sorry. So definitely, so the author is painting this picture of what it looks like, this untouched white beach.
Right. Yeah. So again, very positive towards no human interaction, I guess.
Yep. Okay. The actual people who saw that kind of horizon didn't react to it with joyful anticipation all the time. So now the author is saying, hey, the actual people, like way back in the day, the people who actually saw this untouched horizon didn't really respect it, I guess. Didn't appreciate it.
Okay. Or they just didn't enjoy it. So we don't know how they really felt. We just know they didn't enjoy it.
Yeah. They didn't know the Great Lakes and the plains and the Rockies were out there. So really painting a picture that people really didn't explore way back in the day, didn't know the vast greatness that is the U.S.
Yeah, mysterious, right? We don't know. Yeah. And you can imagine just being one of these people who's out exploring, and what would you think of when you reach a big landscape like the Americas, right? Like what? Yeah. So
I think I'm going to fall off the edge of the planet. Gotta be careful. Unfortunately, there are still people that think that. Anyway, they saw only the dark tree line at the border of their stump-filled clearings, and they were afraid. All right, so tying it back here, this last sentence, tying it back to being outside and being afraid.
Yeah, exactly. So the author is trying to make this assumption that we have kind of ruined civilization, and we're not necessarily going to be as surprised or as mystified or as fearful of it, because we kind of know more about it now. But what the author really wants you to know is that when you don't know something, it scares you, right? When you're not aware of it, it scares you. That's really what the author wants you to know. But the author's also saying as a side note that, hey, look, America's kind of being ruined by civilization.
Yeah. Side note, leave your political ideas away from my articles. Anyway, all right. Third paragraph. Anything could be out there. Anything at all. All right. So anything, again, kind of leaning back towards the unknown, right? What is out there? We don't know. And potentially the fear of that. The first Europeans on the land didn't have the science to conjure UFOs in the wilderness, but they certainly had the theology to imagine a wilderness of devils, a boundless waste occupied by Satan and his works. So the author just painting this picture of what these people, right, the first Europeans that step foot here, outside of the American Indians that were already here, the Native Americans that were here, really what were they thinking about? What were they fearful of?
Right. So again, fear, right? And
Mhm.
it's interesting. They're painting it in terms of Satan and stuff like that. So different fear than what we would usually have, right? But
Mhm.
still fear.
The most wild-eyed among the settlers wouldn't even admit the constellation of shared humanity between themselves and the original inhabitants. All right, so there's a semicolon there, so I'm gonna stop, like you said, and see
Right.
if I can break that down. So the most wild-eyed among the settlers. So I would, a lot of students might go, "What does that mean?" So I think wild-eyed among the settlers, meaning like the most adventurous, the most maybe imaginations, right? The biggest imagination.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Good.
uh, wouldn't admit the consolation of shared humanity. So I don't know what that means. So this is one where I'd probably keep reading and see what else I could get
I
from
mean,
it.
you know the big idea, right?
Mhm.
You already know that we're talking about these people and how they're scared of their environment, right? They're
Yep.
outdoors. But they're also saying, look, even the most adventurous or, whether it's actually exploring or imagination, that's up to you to decide. They don't want to admit that the native or original inhabitants are like them. They like to see them as kind of, Satan, UFO, whatever, fearful kind of ideology you want to put on them.
Mhm.
So that's all it is. It's just saying, look, if we were not just afraid of animals and stuff, we're even afraid of other inhabitants that we're not aware of or we're not accustomed to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then the second half of that sentence with the semicolon. In the words of Cotton Mather, the Puritan divine, American Indians weren't human. There's another semicolon there, so I'll stop at that one. So we're given a person's name, right? Cotton Mather. I'm assuming that's the name there. The Puritan divine, so somebody special, saying, "Hey, American Indians weren't human." So the tying together with the first part of the sentence, it's really we couldn't have this shared humanity because we didn't see them as human.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. And then continuing on after the semicolon, they were, quote, tawny serpents. All right. So I think most people understand what serpents is. I don't know what tawny means, but
Doesn't sound nice.
yeah, less than human, basically.
Right.
All right. The terror of the unknown continent took physical form in these presumably wild men. So the first Europeans here looking at these men being scared of the continent, the terror of the unknown, as it just says here, and that fear was kind of pushed onto these Native Americans.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Indian raiders would sometimes descend on frontier cabins like a sudden localized hurricane, and after dreadful, fast destruction, disappear with captives of whom no trace would ever be found, except to maybe a baby's bonnet, a piece of ribbon, or the blue eyes of a half Indian child met at a trading post years later. All right, so just an example of where some of that fear came from, right? With these Native Americans coming in and raiding the cabins.
Yeah. So again, this fear from the wilderness even applies to Native Americans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Indians in this case. So yeah, good.
All right, next paragraph. Mysteries terrify, especially mysteries that extend from who knows where right to the edge of town. So again, that fear of the outside, and this time it's more metaphorical. Is that if that's the right description of it? The metaphorical outside, right? Outside of town, not necessarily outside of just outside the house.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're scared of what's out there. The progress of us new arrivals clear across the country has been a persistent attempt to stamp out the mysteries and submerge them under pastures and softball fields. So it looks like the author here is trying to basically say, hey, we're trying to be less scared of the unknown by by putting pastures and making softball fields, things that we do know. Makes it less scary.
Yeah, good. Civilization.
Yeah. It's ruining the mysteries. All right. For some reason, people can accept the worst mishaps and violence in built-up places and yet still become electric with fear at the thought of getting jumped by a wild creature in a place without roads. So, again, the author here comparing and saying, hey, we'll put up with it, right? The violence in built-up places, and yet if we're out in the wilderness, we're more scared of that.
Exactly. So again, the fear of this outside, this wilderness. Good.
As anxiety sufferers know, ordinary fears, even bad ones, fear of your husband leaving, of financial reversal, of news from the doctor, can seem small and manageable compared with the dizzying spiral of unspecified fear that bores through you when you have nothing real to be afraid about. So again, just another good examples of fear of the unknown versus kind of fear of everyday things that you might expect.
Right. So when it's in comparison, right, it's basically saying, look, this fear of the wilderness is not that big of a deal, but we make it a big deal, right? And these other things are not that scary for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, last paragraph. One evening, several friends and I were walking along a wooded trail on our way back from fishing at Argyle Lake in a rural part of central Illinois. All right, so pretty straightforward sentence there. The subject of the Argyle monster, a local legend, came up. So there's a local legend, right? The Loch Ness monster, the Argyle monster. Dave said he had seen it once at a distance. So one person saying they've seen this monster. Rick said it had once followed him through the woods for several miles. So another story here. They described it as a large cougar that walked on its hind legs because both of its front paws had been damaged in a trap. Ooh, so good story here. Good campfire story. Also, they said, the Argyle monster screamed like a woman. Okay, more description of this hideous thing. Half kiddingly, I was asking them for more particulars. So the author here trying to get more information. At that moment, we came around a bend and heard a weird sound. We saw where it's coming from, but at first couldn't make sense of what we were seeing. So this last paragraph seems to be just a story, right? This what do you call these stories, like the story of folktales like Bigfoot and all this stuff. The story seemingly born from this fear of the wilderness, fear of the outside.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just an example of how our greatest kind of fears come from this unknown wilderness. And the author's trying to paint an ironic kind of example where, they know it's fake, they're joking about it, but then as soon as they hear something outside in the wilderness, they're up on their feet and worried about it, right? So the author is basically saying that no one can escape this fear of the wilderness, right? Mm-hmm. That's really a big point the author's been making throughout the entire passage. And the author decided to take a more descriptive writing style to get there.
Mm-hmm. And even at the end, it seems like the author, him or herself, couldn't even, right, overcome this fear because they're saying, we saw it, we saw where it was coming from, but at first couldn't make sense of what we were seeing, right? So even the author's like, what is this? I'm scared now too.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's ironic because they were kidding about the monster and now they actually believe it, right? So they're succumbing to their own kind of jokes or stories.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Tons of descriptions. So you definitely weren't kidding there.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand what tawny serpents means. You don't need to understand every word here to know the general course of this passage, this article.
Yeah.
So keep reading, try to understand whatever you can, and you should be okay. But I see a lot of students give up halfway through because they see a couple of sentences that they don't really understand, and they're not keeping track of the bigger idea. So work on that, and practice will definitely help.
I wonder, Jack, have you ever looked into potentially doing exercises or passages where like a certain number of words are just left blank, right? Just crossed out, and just really forcing students to read a passage like this where tawny serpents would be crossed out, and they're like, wait a minute, but how am I supposed to know? And really just proving to them like, look, you don't need to know.
I mean that happens every passage we look at with my students.
Yeah.
Because we'll go through it and I'll literally underline like 4 or 5 sentences that really mattered, and you'll get every question right for the most part. So yeah, if you know how to pick out the right important information, then the sentences around it don't really matter much. But that's a great exercise. Just blanking out a bunch of words and seeing what they'll do. Never thought about that, but that's definitely something that
it might be good to do with a friend. Yeah. Like obviously if you're blanking them out yourself, that might not be as effective. But if you have like a study buddy and be like, hey, like let's swap articles, go and cross out a bunch of the descriptive words and then give it to me, and I'll see if I can still come to the same conclusions and stuff.
You have to be careful though, because there are some words that really matter. Yeah. Right. So you have to be really careful what words you kind of blank out. But yeah, it's especially descriptive kind of words. Those are the ones that don't really matter much.
I like it. So Jack, as this podcast is coming out, it is the beginning of the year. What is in store for CARS and what you are doing at jackwestin.com with courses and stuff, and how can students find out more?
We have another course coming up by the end of this month. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. It's going to be really good for students who are interested in taking the MCAT in April, May, June. Usually Perfect. I recommend if you're really serious about improving your CARS score, that you start sooner rather than later. You don't want to approach CARS the last month. You want to look at it, prepare months in advance. And so if you're taking the MCAT and you really want to see some improvements, then I recommend looking into the course. If you're already at a 127, 128, keep doing what you're doing. You don't need to change anything. I mean, 127 is enough to get into any school for that matter. I mean, for the most part. I mean, there's some Canadian schools that you really do need like a 130. But if you're an American or applying to American schools, 127 is a stellar score for CARS. So just keep at it. I have a lot of students who are at a 122, 123, 124, and they just want to understand this test. And that's what I offer them, is a course to help them understand this test. And one of the things that I think that makes us special, or our company very special, is we like to help students until they're ready. So as long as they're working hard, we'll help you until you're ready. So it makes sense to sign up earlier, because you'll get the assistance, the support that you need. Even if your course ends, we'll still give you support at no cost, as long as you're working hard. Now, I do have students who sign up and, after a couple of weeks, they just get busy with school and stuff. And that's not what I'm referring to. You need to work hard. If you do, and you do the assignments, you do the lectures, you're going to get somewhere. You're going to definitely start seeing improvements and you will better understand this test, and hopefully be independently approaching this test without, anyone's help, really.
All right. There you have it. Another great episode for you. Another great passage, really trying to figure out the MCAT and the CARS section. If you are looking for more help, some more free help, go to jackwestin.com, click on practice, and click on the MCAT CARS practice. You get free daily passages right to your email inbox. Again, that's jackwestin.com. Click on practice and then click on MCAT CARS practice. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT CARS podcast.
This is MedEd Media.